Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Courage Conversation Show. I'm your host, Ashley Easter. I'm the founder and executive director of Courage 365, and we have a great show planned for you tonight. We have Debra Doak, who is going to be talking about high conflict marriages and leaving high conflict marriages. So if you are in a high conflict marriage, if you have been in the past, or if you know somebody, this is going to be super helpful for you. We're going to be talking about how to de-escalate situations, those types of things, and it's really going to be a powerful episode. And I would encourage you, if you are watching this right now on social media, to go ahead and give this a share, because there are so many people in our lives that we may not know exactly what they're going through, but this might reach the person who needs it the most. So go ahead and hit share if you can. If you're watching on YouTube, you can just copy the link and put it on your social media. We would appreciate that so much. And if you want to tag Courage 365 in it, that would be great. Anyway, we're so glad to have you here. It's going to be a really, really important show. I'm going to go ahead and read Debra's bio really quickly before we bring her onto the screen. So Debra Doak is a certified divorce coach, certified divorce financial analyst, family court mediator, and author of High Conflict Divorce for Women. She is committed to helping clients speak up for what they deserve in their relationships or at the negotiation table. She believes that while all divorce involves some degree of conflict, most of us have more influence on the costs and outcomes than we realize. As an alternative dispute resolution specialist, she helps clients prepare for and effectively respond to conflict to create better divorce outcomes for families. All right, so we are going to bring Debra right onto the show in just a few minutes, but we're going to pause for a quick break.
Anxiousness can strike at any time, while driving a car, in the middle of the night, when giving a work presentation, or in a crowded place. Introducing Calmigo, a smart calming device that learns your personal breathing patterns and adapts to you for immediate relief in just 3 minutes. It quiets your senses through breathing regulation, multisensory stimulation, and calming scents. Don't stress another moment. Click the Learn More button and start using Calmigo today.
Talk about it. I was told not to talk about it.
So I'm here to talk about it.
Because I can't stay quiet.
I was able to break my silence.
Because of those who refuse to stay quiet.
I am a businesswoman.
Activist.
Survivor.
Survivor. Survivor.
Hey, Debra, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. Excited to have you.
Oh my goodness, I'm so thrilled to be here.
Yeah, I believe it was Maureen Garcia. She found your work. She's one of our board members. And when she passed along your information, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, we must have Debra on the show. This is going to be so valuable. A lot of our community has experienced some sort of domestic violence, and those are definitely high conflict divorce situations. And so I think this is going to be really powerful, and I'm excited to hear your insight. And just reading your bio, you have so many different credentials on this. How many years have you been doing this work?
I would say unofficially for about 20.
Wow.
I was on staff of a church as a divorced person. So you can imagine every single person who was going through this, thinking about this, came to me. And so I didn't turn it into a career probably until about 5 years ago.
Wow. So
I've been doing it really professionally. Yeah.
Yeah, you've definitely been doing this for quite a while, and I'm thankful for that work because it's much needed. And even knowing that you are in a church environment, I know that I grew up in church that didn't believe in divorce, and so I think it's really powerful that you are giving women this opportunity to know about healthy ways to go about that, because it's often just not talked about. Now, I want to get into some questions with you. And the first one is, what are some of the biggest fears clients have about leaving high conflict divorce? I mean, I'm sure you've seen things across the board, but maybe you could just kind of talk
Mhm.
about some of those fears that often come up.
I would say the top three are pretty consistent. It's money, kids, and conflict.
Wow. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
often, right, it's the money. They either have been in a financially controlling situation
Yes.
where they don't have access to money. They're kind of given an allowance, or they're a stay-at-home
Mm,
parent, a lower earner, or they don't even have insight into. They have no idea what's in the 401k. They have
mm,
no idea what the mortgage balance is, so they don't have any insight. They have no clue what's there. So the big question is, if I would leave, can I support myself? I don't even know, right?
right. It's huge.
And then they have concerns about their kids. What would a parenting plan look like? What would this custody agreement look like? Are my kids going to be safe with him
Mm,
if he gets, really generous parenting time? And
right.
then, of course, the conflict. Is he going to flip a switch if I make this choice to walk away? Because we know that's when victims are at the most risk,
Yes.
when they choose to leave, right?
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that those really are the big three. When I have talked
Yeah.
to victims and survivors, they're like, I can't leave yet because I don't have a financial plan. Or if I leave,
Hmm.
I'm not going to be able to take care of my kids um,
Right.
because I've been put in a situation where I'm not allowed to make money or have control over finances. I don't even know what's there. Um, and then even, that last one is really important as well. I think that you really hit the nail on the head, and I'm sure that people listening are thinking through their mind if they've been through a situation or if they're considering a situation like this with divorce. I think that's top of mind. So, kind of moving into like
Hmm.
when thinking about leaving, what are some of the steps victims should take? Because, as you said, the escalation often happens right when they're thinking about escaping, when they say, I'm done. That can be the most
Hmm.
dangerous time. That's when the highest amounts of deaths happen for women
Yep.
from domestic violence. So, what do they need to know about leaving?
So the first thing I do with a client who comes to me who's in this situation is we inventory their fears.
Mm,
What what are you afraid of? Because fears are often questions waiting to be answered.
yeah, yeah.
And my favorite quote is Ralph Waldo Emerson says, knowledge is the antidote to fear.
Mm,
And fear is what causes conflict to escalate. Fear
yeah,
is what causes impulsive bad decisions in divorce. Fear is what causes legal bills to get out of control. So when we start with an inventory of those fears, we can determine, are they rooted in truth or not? So can I afford to support myself? I don't know, but we can figure that out. We
yeah,
can get the information you need to answer that question, right? So, what are those fears? And then, can we do research on our own? Can we do a little legwork? Do we need to consult with a professional? Who do we need to talk to? What questions do we have for them? So, really chipping away at those fears,
mm,
right? So, one of my favorite stories is I had a client in San Francisco where, of course, the cost of living is ridiculous. And she said to me, and it was a fairly abusive marriage. He was a police officer, which comes with that
mhm. Yep.
toxic masculinity. She said, I'll never ever be able to afford to leave, but what I would like is your help with boundaries and assertive
Mm,
communication so that I can just tolerate this until my kids are old enough.
mm,
And I said, humor me, humor me.
yeah.
Let's go through your living expenses. What would it look like if you lived on your own? How much would it cost you? And she did the exercise and she said, see, I could never do that. And I said, let's take one more step, consult with an attorney and find out what spousal support, child support might be. You've got,
Mm,
get a copy of his paycheck, take your tax return in. And when she came back, she said, "See, I told you." I said, "You're right. You're $1,000 short a month. Doesn't work right now, does it?" She said, "Nope, told you." I said, "Yeah. Unless you can earn $250 a week, you can't leave." And she went, $250 a week? I can do that.
Mm.
So this process of going step by step
Yeah.
through, right? What we identified was now she has a target. Now we can have an exit strategy, I call it.
Right.
So we get all these questions answered, and then we can create plans to make it work.
Mm. That's really powerful. I love how you're engaging with the fears that are there, and the fears are real. They're valid, and
For
uh,
real.
yeah, absolutely. And what we know about the brain is when we get fearful, when we're in that fight or flight kind of
Hmm.
feeling, a lot of the problem solving parts of our brain kind of close off and shut down.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
it's all focused on, safety in the moment. And so having someone like you come in and talk about,
Hmm.
like, these are legitimate fears, but let's actually look at them from a logical place when you're not in your fight or flight. You're able to ask the probing questions that are helpful, direct them through the
Hmm.
process. That's wow, that's a really valuable thing. And I love also how you break it down into small chunks, because I think that
Hmm.
can be so overwhelming for survivors in general when they're going to leave. Maybe it's not a domestic violence situation where they're divorcing. Maybe it's leaving a cult. Maybe it is leaving
Right.
some other sort of abusive environment. When you do that, it seems so big. And if you do it all at once, it is big. But sometimes there's little steps you can take to make it more manageable,
Hmm.
and that builds up over time.
It does. And that's why I love creating this exit strategy. And I say for people, yeah, mate, you can't leave today. Great. But can you leave in 6 months? Can you leave in 2 years? I've worked with
Mm,
clients on a 2-year exit strategy. We have to wait till the baby goes to school. We have to wait till she finishes her nursing degree. We have to wait until. Great. But the difference between that and being stuck, when you're stuck and you don't have a plan, you feel helpless. You
right.
feel hopeless, right? You continue to be ground down.
Mm,
Whereas if you have a plan and I call it waiting with intention,
mm,
you know your why. You know
yeah.
why you're still there. And what our brain also knows is if I have a reason I'm doing something hard, I can bear it a lot more easily.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, when you kind of have a
You
light at
know?
the end of the tunnel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So addressing that's why I think it's really important to start with these fears. And as you mentioned, when that fear gets activated, that primitive part of our brain, the amygdala, which my clients and I have nicknamed Amy. We call her Amy. And we say our goal is to keep Amy buckled in the car seat in the back seat. We do not want her unbuckling, climbing over, and grabbing the steering wheel.
Right.
Because once she's in charge and she's driving, all bets are off in terms of rational, logical thought. And if you're planning to leave an abuser, you have really important life altering decisions to make. And you
Mm,
don't want Amy making those decisions for you,
that's a really good way to put that. Absolutely.
you know?
And yeah, kind of on that note, so we've talked a little bit about those baby steps, but what about the safety pieces? Do you recommend that they reach out to local domestic violence prevention centers? Because there's the plan of leaving practically, but what about the safety aspect of it? How do you address those things?
Right. So when we're inventorying those fears, we have to assess the threat level, right, of
Right.
physical violence,
Yeah.
of um, cutting off financial support, of all those things. And so as we're assessing those, yes, if physical safety is going to become a concern, we definitely want them reaching out to the hotline.org, the local domestic violence resources, right? Which I recommend. If you don't know where those are, womenslaw.org has a great inventory down to the county level.
Mm.
You probably have access to those too, but get with a counselor to create your own safety plan and get a checking account, start stashing some cash, do, all those normal safety things so that, again, at the end of your exit strategy, when you're ready to go, I call it the night you take dinner out of the oven because that's what happened to me. It was just most of us think about it for a long time and then we have a crystalline moment when you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, no,
Mm.
no, 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 I'm finished.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's really good. And I'd be interested in people who are listening and feel safe commenting about that, even if they're in like our private group, because we also stream this there. I would be interested in what your crystallizing moment was. If you feel comfortable to share, I'd be interested. If it was taking food out of the oven, if it was something else. So
Yeah.
anybody tuning in and you feel comfortable to share, I think we'd be really interested in like what that moment was. Um, yes. So we're gonna come back after a short break, and I want to talk about finances. So we'll be right back,
Hmm.
everybody, and that's gonna continue this really important discussion.
Anxiousness can strike at any time, while driving a car, in the middle of the night, when giving a work presentation, or in a crowded place. Introducing Calmigo, a smart calming device that learns your personal breathing patterns and adapts to you for immediate relief in just 3 minutes. It quiets your senses through breathing regulation, multisensory stimulation, and calming scents. Don't stress another moment. Click the Learn More button and start using Calmigo today.
Waking up every day in fear, living in a constant cycle of self-doubt and anxiety. We at Courage 365 know that this is what it's like for many survivors of abuse. The abuse may be over, but the healing journey has just begun. After getting professional support, the next most important step is finding a supportive community. And that's why we've created Courage Clubs. Courage Clubs are free online peer support groups created by survivors for survivors. Courage Clubs are for adults who have survived abuse and wish to build supportive community with other survivors. Each month, we discuss a new topic with helpful tools and resources for your healing journey. We can't promise your healing journey will be easy, but we can promise you don't have to do it alone. Hey everyone, we are back with Debra Doak, and we are talking about leaving high conflict relationships, high conflict marriages, and divorce. And so we've talked about a variety of subjects, but now I kind of want to move into the finance part of things because that is such a huge fear, concern, and is so relevant to this conversation. What I have found in talking with a lot of victims and survivors is that money is something that's used as a tool of control over them. And so they may not have any idea what's going on with the finances. And so for somebody that maybe doesn't have access to finances, maybe like you mentioned before, is only given an allowance, what do you do in a
Hmm.
situation like that? Talk to us about that.
Right. So if they haven't been involved in finances, this is going to be a scary thing for them. So again, we start with this idea of a budget.
Mm,
What is it going to cost you to live on your own? And we can estimate some of those things. They can talk with friends if they have a trusted friend
yeah.
who lives in a home that's about their same size. What's your electric bill? How much does it cost you to get your grass cut? You know, we can estimate. We don't have to be exact at this point, but we're
Right.
trying to get an idea. Does it cost you $3,000 a month to run your household, or does it cost you nine?
Mm,
Right? We're trying to get a ballpark. One of the biggest things that's going to be an issue for most women is health insurance,
right.
because when you divorce, that's one of the things you're going to lose. So it's really important to start looking. That's going to be one of your biggest budget items, likely.
Right.
So we want to start doing some research around that in terms of healthcare.gov and maybe MediShare, which is a Christian co-op where you can get insurance, or talking to local independent insurance agencies, right?
Right.
And just starting to build that budget. And then, like I said, take those fears, consult with an attorney, find out what spousal support and child support might be for you, if that's going to be your income line item,
Mm.
and start to build this picture of what it might look like for you. And then we can see where the gaps are. We can see where the holes are. We can see if you might be in a situation where your husband could be hiding money,
Mm.
because that's a big one too. When we have this kind of financial control and abuse, there might be some warning signs or some red flags that there are, I call them shenanigans going on,
Right.
right? Now, if your husband is a W-2 employee, it may be less likely, but if he runs a business that's more cash based, you know, construction or something where he might be able to get some cash payments, or that's typically something that your lifestyle runs on. He runs his own business where there's the ability to kind of move money around. There might be some warning signs that it's not going to be quite that cut and dry. There's just a W-2 paycheck that's his salary that we're going to do calculations off of. Yeah.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. So,
Um,
yeah.
I remember talking with someone who found out that their husband had a whole overseas account, and it was quite large, and they had
Yeah.
no idea. They thought that they were, you know, kind of destitute, and they were not. They just weren't getting
Right.
access to those funds. And so I guess, are those things found out later on in court, or how do you find out those things if you suspect them?
hmm So, the silver lining of the divorce process, once you start, is, and this is part of what I want you to assess once you get into it, is mediation is always going to be the lowest cost, lowest conflict option, right? So we want to assess if that's going to work for your family. It's going to be least damaging to your kids. It's going to cost your family a lot less. It's going to preserve any co-parenting relationship that you might be able to keep. But in a normal divorce process, you start kind of with filing. The next step is always a financial disclosure process. Every state has a form that's mandatory where you disclose your income, expenses, assets, and debts to each other. And then if you see anything that doesn't make sense to you, like he's been working at that job for 20 years and he only has $50,000 in his 401k, not quite buying it, right?
Mm.
Some of these, warning signs that you might see. Then there's a second step called discovery. And discovery is where you can ask the other side for more information. I'd like to see copies of credit card statements, of bank statements, past 401k statements, right? You can dig a little deeper. You can ask what they call interrogatories, which are questions they answer under oath.
Mm.
Now, we also know the one thing we have to be really careful about is we also know abusers have no trouble lying, and that includes under oath and in a courtroom.
Right, right.
So we don't want to work under the false expectation that they're going to be honest and transparent.
Mm.
And so that's, if we really have reason to believe there is a lot of money hidden, that's when we might engage the services of someone called a forensic accountant, if that's a term you're familiar with. And a forensic accountant is someone that specializes in finding hidden money.
Mm.
That's literally what their job is. Now, they're not cheap. They cost several $1,000s. So it's not someone you'd want to hire if you think you're looking for $2,500. But if you think there are hundreds of thousands of dollars that are missing here, there is an expert, there's a professional out there that is really good at finding that stuff.
Wow. I think most people probably don't even know that that exists. And so it's,
Mm-hmm.
unless you've gone through this process, a lot of times you don't know all the services that are available. But that's really good to know. Kind of shifting focus a little bit. What are some of the mistakes that you often see people making, particularly maybe your clients that you've worked with, when divorcing a high conflict person, because, it's a situation that you don't want to be in the first place. There's probably a lot of
Mhm.
history with that person, or you wouldn't have been married to them. And so
Right.
there may be patterns that people are engaging in, even if it's just for survival, that aren't serving them. And so maybe you could talk
Mhm.
about some of those things that you see, and, how to maybe engage in a better way.
Right. So, we talked about Amy, and if you've been with a someone who's manipulative, controlling, right? As soon as you say divorce, you might start hearing declarations of outcome. Well, you're not going to get the house. I'm going to get the kids. You're never gonna, you're going to have to get a job. You're going to, whatever. You hear those kind of statements.
Right.
And the first piece of advice I give people is just because he says it doesn't mean it's true.
Right.
So I want you to let Amy stay in the back. Don't freak out yet, right? About those things, because when fear comes up, then, right, and you're going to engage in that kind of jading behavior, justify, argue, defend, and explain. You're going to get
Mm.
on the hamster wheel with him and start to explain, but I've lived in this house too, and it's partially mine, and you're just going to take the bait and get into that.
Right.
So the right, so you just say, we'll see, or that's what we have attorneys for, to help us figure all this stuff out,
Yeah.
instead of taking any of those hooks, because they are usually better at that kind of circular conversation than we are.
That's true.
Right, so we don't want to do that. The other mistake I see people make is just kind of leaving and then limiting access to the children. And I want to caution your listeners about that, right? Because to the court, if both of you come into a trial or a motion or a hearing, the court assumes both of you are responsible for not being able to resolve your differences and being in conflict and being in the courtroom. So you want to be sure that you're showing up basically clean and white like a nun,
Mm.
and that you're doing everything you can to foster a good co-parenting relationship, to be transparent, to try to get this resolved. And
Mm.
so it's really important not to limit access to the kids, because you don't want to be seen as that kind of parent, unless you have physical safety concerns and you've got a restraining order and that kind of thing. If you've, I want you to have some sort of parenting agreement in place.
Got it. Got it. And I like that caveat
Right.
there. If they're in physical danger, then it's important to get that restraining order, and that's a completely
Right.
different situation versus it's not a great environment to have kids in with manipulation and those types of things, but you sometimes
Mm-hmm.
have to think about what's the long-term outcome going to be, and talking strategy with your attorney, and all of those things, so you could actually get what you want in the end, versus kind of
Mm-hmm.
messing that up um, in the short term and then having long-term consequences.
Correct. You don't want to set him up and give him ammunition to come in with a claim that you're a gatekeeper or you're alienating or any of those things, right? You want to go into the court and say things like, the most important thing to me is that my kids have a great relationship with a healthy dad. And right. And then you can present your evidence if you've been keeping documentation about patterns of behavior
Right.
and those kinds of things. But up front, you don't want to be seen as the one creating the conflict.
Got it. Got it. That makes
Got
sense.
it? Right. Yeah. So physical and sexual safety is a different issue. But if you're talking about our typical person who has a temper, is manipulative, those kinds of things, set yourself up for long-term success. I love how you said that.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Other mistakes I see are just being reactive, posting things on social media, telling people outside the circle of people who really need to know
Right. Right.
details that they don't need to know. So, we're going to keep this tight. And then high conflict communication, right? So anything you email or text or say, because he may be recording you and you may be in a state where he doesn't have to have your permission. Anything you say, text, right? I want you to pretend you're standing in the courtroom reading it to the judge. If you wouldn't say it to your children or you wouldn't say it in a courtroom in front of the judge, do not text it to your spouse.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hear that I know you're angry. I know you're scared. I know he's doing all kinds of awful things. Tell your therapist, your girlfriend, your coach about that. Don't text it to him. Use the BIF method if you're familiar with Bill Eddy. Bill Eddy has a great book on the BIF method of communication: brief, informative, friendly, and firm. It's the gold standard for co-parenting and divorce communication.
Wow. That's helpful.
Yeah. So those are probably the big ones I see, is freaking out when he says something, makes a threat, makes a declaration without it's probably not grounded in truth. So don't accept it yet. That's truth, right? Right. Don't vent your feelings to him because it might be read in court, right? And don't withhold the kids from him if you don't have the court's backing or advice from your attorney to do so. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's really helpful. And I think it's a natural thing to want to say what you're thinking and feeling to the person who's hurting you. But you have to remember that this is a legal system. And again, you have to keep the end goal in mind. And, I think also going into the trauma responses again. So one of the trauma responses is to fight. And a lot of that is to fight back. And you can fight for yourself and your children, but you need to do that in a way that's ultimately going to be effective. Is sending a text message that's going to be shown in court later making you, making trouble for you in court? Is that really the way you want to fight this case? Or is it that you'd like to kind of, think through your words and go through the legal system and make sure you have the best chance of getting what you want and deserve out of the situation?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's protecting your kids too, because again, you don't want to be viewed as the high conflict person in this.
Yeah.
Because the one thing we know also about abusers is they can be really charming and charismatic. Whereas if you're in your trauma response, what do you look like?
Yeah.
So imagine the contrast to a judge, to people in a court that don't know you. And you are upset. You are dysregulated emotionally, meaning you're not speaking as clearly, as succinctly, as concisely. And here he's over here, Mr. Calm, Cool, and Collected, going, look at her. It's not me.
Yep. Definitely, 100%. I think that's really important to keep in mind. Yeah, and if you had to give our listeners like your number one tip to take away from this conversation, or even just your wisdom in general, what tip would you give people who are thinking about leaving high stakes divorce situations, or maybe are really in that process right now?
The number one tip I would give them is, I think, remember the power of the pause. If I could say anything else, it is pause. Pause before you speak, pause before you act, pause before you do anything. Because that's where we get in trouble, is when we don't take that beat before we tell somebody, talk to the mom at the soccer game and give her information she doesn't need to know.
Right.
Before you send that text, before you say something in front of your kids, right? Before you make a financial move you shouldn't make. Just all the things. Pause. Okay. I'm freaking out. I'm feeling really scared. I'm feeling really angry. Who do I need to talk to get guidance about my next step? Because clearly it's not me right now. I'm too mad.
Right. Absolutely. No, that's really good. That's really good. And um I guess we have kind of just two final questions for you. One is really along those lines. I just asked about what's the piece of advice that our listeners should take away from this interview, but you have so much wisdom and experience. What's the best piece of advice that you've ever received? And how does that stick with you and maybe affect your life?
So the best piece of advice I ever received, and I actually wrote a blog post on this, was stop being so nice.
Mm.
And that is the boundaries and the assertive communication and the just staying rooted in your own power. And this idea that, one of the dynamics that we get stuck in, I think, in these kind of relationships is he wants to have power over. And so we get in the habit of allowing his wants to override our feelings.
Yeah.
And that's part of taking that back is like, well, it doesn't really matter what someone else wants. It doesn't feel good to me. Right. And so I would say that's the number one piece of advice I got was stop being so nice.
That is so good. Yes. And I think that just even in general in society, women are
Mm-hmm.
conditioned to be nice and to appease. And even that can be one of the
Right.
signs of trauma. You got fight, fight, freeze, and then fawn, which is just like trying to appease
Yes.
people, often for safety
Right.
reasons, even if it's just emotional and relational
Mm-hmm.
safety,
Yes.
connection. And so that's really
Mm-hmm.
powerful. You don't have to be nasty to
Yeah.
not be as nice.
Right. That's it. You don't have to attack, but you don't have to retreat. It's this idea of staying rooted in your power. And, that's why I say it's standing up for what you deserve. And so once we get into the divorce process, it's really working. I work with women. I love to do this is helping them advocate for themselves. And that doesn't mean fight,
Yeah.
that just means advocate. So that means, you know, he puts a proposal on the table, and I don't care if he's yelling or screaming or threatening. You can say, yeah, I'm just not comfortable agreeing to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you nod your head and you allow the silence to fill the room. And he can be angry all he wants, and I'm not responsible for those feelings.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. No, that's really important stuff. And I know after this, people are going to want to get in touch with you and your work. So
Mhm.
tell us how people can find you online. I think you also have
Sure.
a discount code that you wanted to offer, which is really generous. Tell us about all of that.
Absolutely. So probably the best place to find me is my website, which is super easy. It's my name, Debra Doak, DebraDoak.com. And on there, one of the things you'll find is something I call the Ditch Your Divorce Fears Financial Planner. And it's got all the worksheets and instructions and stuff to start through this process I'm talking about. Your budget, inventorying your assets and debts, even your household goods, getting ready for attorney consults, and thinking about the getting ready for the finances of what it would look like if you left. So if you use the coupon code Courage365, I will give you $10 off that. And it's really affordable. It's normally $29.95. So with this coupon code, it's going to be, or no, it's normally $19.95. And so with coupon code, it's going to be $9.95. You can download this packet of all the spreadsheets to help you conquer your financial fears.
Oh,
So that'll be really helpful.
generous.
And then if you want to follow me on social, it can on Instagram and Facebook, it's just Debra Doak Coach.
Awesome. Perfect. Okay. I know everybody's going to want to follow you. And hey, thank you so much for your time today. This has been very
Yeah.
enlightening. And I just thank you so, so much.
Yeah, I loved it. Thank you so much. And yeah, any of your listeners, reach out if I can help. Download the financial worksheets if that's a fear of yours. It'll take you step by step and get you started on, again, what is that target that you need to reach? We can make a plan to hit a target.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to get started on that, even if you think it's going to be a couple years before you're ready to leave. Just start now. Take steps.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. I know that's going to be helpful. Everybody definitely go check out Debra's website, social media, and this gift. It's a really generous offer. We'll make sure to put the coupon code in the show notes below or in the comments below where you are seeing that. And everyone, also feel free to come on over and follow Courage 365 on all of our social media accounts. We have Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, and would love to have you follow us over there. Again, please hit share on this video. Even if you're not in a situation right now where high conflict divorce is in the cards, still share this, because the chances are some of your friends on your friends list are or are considering it, even if they haven't said anything. So this could be really useful information to share. I also want to let you know about some of our free resources that we're offering. So when you go to our website, courage365.org, of course, you can get our free ebook, 5 Keys to Living a Life of Courage. This is a free ebook. You just go to our homepage, scroll down a bit, and you can get the next most courageous steps that you can take as a survivor to step into your healing journey. We also have a variety of other resources for you, and one that I want to highlight actually right now is we have a text messaging service. So this is something where survivors have created text messages. They're empowering text messages that we send out every morning, Monday through Friday. This is free to sign up for the list. And when you do that, you're going to receive these messages. We've had so much positive feedback from people, and I just want to show you how to do it. So just pull up your phone here, just pull it up now, and open it to a clean text message. And in the top part where it says to, you're going to type 917-809-7311. Okay, so get your phone out, flip open to a new text message place, and type in 917-809-7311. And then in the message part, you're just going to type the word courage, just courage right there. You hit send, you'll automatically be added to our text message list and start receiving those messages. We don't spam you. You're not getting message from other survivors. You're simply getting messages from us. And we found that super helpful for people. Something else I want to remind you about is that we have our Courage Club meetings. So Courage Clubs are our peer support groups. They're online. They're totally free. All you have to do is register. And we're going to have our next one coming up really soon. It's always the first Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. Eastern. And so whether you can make it to this one or not, go ahead and register. All you have to do is go to courage365.org/clubs or courage365.org, and you'll see clubs in the top portion there. Again, this is completely free, but you do have to register for it. We're having our second one that's going to be on in the first Wednesday of July at 7 p.m. Eastern. And we will send you emails all about how you can join and all the materials and concepts we're going to be going over. So hopefully that'll be helpful to you. Thank you so much for tuning into the show today. Please, again, go ahead and check out Debra's social media. You'll see it in the show notes below or in the comments below. And live with courage.